Pardon the insight, but I'm JD. Job openings are starting to slow down after more than a year of record low unemployment. Does this mean frontline staffing shortages are a thing of the past?
I'm Josh Felix. Well, 42% of frontline workers want to quit their jobs right now. So I'm thinking the answer is nope.
Welcome to ITK, friends. On today's episode, we're answering the question, what do deskless workers want? By digging into our latest research into the frontline experience. The Deskless Report is available for download right now at axonify.com/deskless. It's 65 pages packed with insights that showcase the disconnect between what corporate workers think happens on the front lines and what really happens in stores, restaurants, hotels, manufacturing facilities, and more every day. So let's begin our conversation into the state of the frontline work experience with a topic that's not getting nearly enough attention, and that's managers. Over the past 2 years, managers have been asked to be everything to everyone as they try to hit their KPIs while keeping the operation running safely and efficiently despite limited staffing. So Josh, is it any wonder that half of frontline managers feel burned out on a daily basis, according to the Deskless Report?
You know, JD, it really isn't. When you think about it, the managers, they feel powerless to really drive change in their organizations right now, which they know they desperately need to grow and thrive. The struggle comes to mind is the outdated communication tools, the feedback tools, the training tools, execution systems. 49% feel burned out on a daily basis right now, a daily basis. They're worried. Do they need to cover shifts? Are employees happy? Is there a supply chain issue? Are they really even going to get the product that they need to open the doors today? So, managers feel corporate is out of touch with the day-to-day chaos. So they're just burnt out with what they have to do. But I don't want to forget, frontline workers, frontline managers, and corporate leaders all rank staffing issues and burnout at the top of their list.
There's a great quote in the report from a retail manager, and they say, there's a blurred line between managers and their roles. We're expected to take on roles we've never been trained for and that we really don't have experience in, so it's a bit overwhelming. And my question for everyone out there who's supporting a frontline team would be, are managers being provided with the training and tools to do this job? Right. So as compared to what maybe a manager was as defined previously, or maybe kind of the operational notion of a manager who is someone who runs the store, right, runs the business, makes sure, as you said, products are on shelves, the registers are counted down, those types of day-to-day scheduling responsibilities, those things, right? Are they being equipped with dealing with the complexity and the range of responsibilities they're being asked to carry? And how does that influence how you select and promote managers? Some people may naturally have that ability to show empathy, the ability to lead a team. But a lot of managers, frankly, were promoted because they were really good at the operation, right? They were really good at the job. And now they find themselves in charge of people. So I think what we have to do is, and I think what the report shows around this idea of how managers are getting burned out is we really have to give managers permission to lead. And to me, that means the tools, the training, and most importantly, the time to focus on their people in addition to running the business. And, staffing challenges are hopefully going to lessen, but I believe we're past the days of being able to effectively run a business based on excess effort, right? Asking people to take on overtime, to take on additional shifts. And we can't keep asking managers to work 60, 70, 80-hour weeks to make up the difference. So the manager can't be everything to everyone. And it's important that we give them that ability, that permission, and the necessary tools to lead.
Yeah. So let's jump to our next topic. Perhaps frontline managers are burning out because they're trying to make up for the fact that deskless workers' fundamental needs aren't being met. Both corporate leaders and frontline workers agree that equitable compensation is the top driver of frontline happiness. But research shows a lack of alignment on every other factor. So JD, what should we take away from this disconnect?
I think what the Deskless Report really shows is that you don't understand frontline reality unless you live it, unless you actually do the job and understand what it means to do the job today. And I think there are some corporate team members out there, and I was one of them, who came from the front line and have done the job. But when was that? In a lot of cases, it was years ago. And a lot of others have never actually done the job. And I would say that semi-regular location visits don't count for understanding what day-to-day reality looks like on the front line, because as someone who was a location manager, my location never looked the way it looked day to day when corporate was coming to town. right? It didn't reflect the reality. So there's a great image in our Frontline report called the hierarchy of frontline worker needs. And I think what you can really take away from this part of the report is that, the common conversations are kind of the top and bottom layers. The idea of the critical need for equitable compensation, which is without a doubt essential to making sure people can live and take care of their families. But then organizations just kind of expect those foundational elements to get them to the culture of raving fans that they want. And they ignore those middle layers, the critical ideas like, how do we provide stability and flexibility? How do we make sure people feel like they're part of a workplace community? So if you want to create a culture of brand ambassadors, raving fans on the front line, I think it's those middle layers you really got to take care of.
Yes, I think it's so important because I think often when we think about what that individual needs, they need stability. They need the stability. They want to come to work and they want to feel stable. But they're coming to work right now. They're scared. They're overworked and they're burned out. Right. So that's how we're getting them when they come in the front door. So the challenge comes in and we, jump back to that manager. That manager becomes this people person now, right? They're not an execution person, but how can they focus on that hierarchy and truly deliver what that individual needs?
Absolutely. Let's take a quick break. Coming up, corporate teams continue to play games of telephone with critical communications, and frontline workers have a lot to say, but not a lot of chances to say it.
Have you heard about JD's new book? The Modern Learning Ecosystem is a practical, personal, and humorous take on the role L&D must play in building disruption-ready organizations. The book is packed with tips, tricks, examples, and stories from JD's 20-year career in corporate operations and talent development. Learn more and pre-order your copy today at jdwroteabook.com.
Time for What's the Word, where I'm known as the Chuck Norris of the thesaurus. What's up first?
Top-down communication on the front line is blank.
I'm going with the word snail mail. Snail mail. It's actually two words, but I'm going to the glasses. I'm going to the glasses for this stat. 65% of corporate leaders believe communication's effective. 35% of frontline workers agree. And what I would ask everyone out there, if you support a frontline team, is if you have an important message, you need to get it out to every frontline employee. So everyone in the stores, distribution centers, delivery drivers, whatnot. How do you do that? Well, the reality is most people on the front line don't have email. And if they do have email, when are they going to check it? Because are you even checking your email throughout the course of the day? And I think we're still relying on a lot of antiquated analog tactics like pre-shift meetings that not everyone's scheduled to attend. Not everyone's working today to get the message, or bulletin boards that just kind of fade into the background and become part of the wall and don't really stand out with timely information. And I think this is a low-hanging fruit problem that we can solve if we think about how communication needs to work on the front line. So that's why I went with snail mail.
And for me, since you had two words, I'm going to use a word and a number. I'm going with Artemis 1. Why Artemis 1? The process is fractured right now. Down, JD, where you're located, we're trying to launch a new spacecraft, but they're using recycled parts from 20 plus years ago, from decades ago. That's the same thing that's happening in communication right now. One manager in the report says that the idea of top-down communication, it's like sending information into the abyss. It reminds me of the old telephone game, right? So JD, can you grab one can? There's a string, I'll grab the other can, and I'm going to tell you something, and then we're going to send it around the circle. By the time it gets around the circle, we forgot half of that information within the first hour. So truly, communication for the front line is fractured right now.
Yeah, and I think it's clearly one of those areas that highlights in the report the difference between thinking about the experience of a corporate worker, a remote worker, hybrid worker, someone like me, and what it's like to do the job every day and how that changes fundamental elements of the work experience. And I think communication is a critical part of that story. All right, what's up with our next word?
Bubbling information up from the front line to corporate is blank.
So with this one, I went with cattywampus. Cattywampus. First, I just wanted to say that word on the show, cattywampus. Second, I think it connects to what we were just talking about things being a bit all over the place, not consistent, not process oriented. And I think one of those things is clearly the opportunity to provide feedback. The biggest stat, I think if you read the Deskless report, you walk away with one number from this report. I think that number needs to be that 39% of frontline workers feel heard. So only 39% feel like they have the opportunity to participate. And that number is down from 59% last year. So it's not just a low number, it's a falling off a cliff type of a number. And what the further research shows is that people want to participate. There's great stats in the report around where people want the opportunity to provide feedback as compared to the feedback they're asked to provide. And the unfortunate reality is that tell your manager is not a scalable way to engage people in the workplace and offer the opportunity to provide feedback. So there's not enough structured opportunity built in around the unstructured stuff. So that's why I went with cattywampus.
And for me, grabbing two words again, I'm going with rather dubious. So bubbling up information, better known as feedback, is truly eroding the frontline's trust and willingness to share right now. Employees are motivated to provide feedback that can drive revenue, improve customer experience, and create efficient processes. Probably want to focus on the last one most importantly when we think about the frontline worker. But you had mentioned, right? Tell your manager, right? That old term, tell your manager. But the managers, they're burnt out from being the middleman. They don't want to be the go-between anymore. We just aren't seeing the investment as well. The front line just doesn't have the trust in the process that currently exists. And that brings me just that feeling.
And I mean, just realistically, if you think about someone, we always have that old adage where we say, who knows how to do the job best, but the people who do the job every day. And when you have tens to hundreds of thousands of those individuals, ask or tell your manager so that person, maybe is a department manager, tells a store manager, tells a regional manager, tells a district manager, right? By the time the information maybe gets to the decision maker, how fast that information moving, and can you really take advantage of it? So that's where I think combining structured and unstructured feedback is a critical part of improving the frontline experience we're talking about today. So that's it for What's the Word? Let's take another quick break. And on the other side, we're going to find out why upskilling may be the key to reducing turnover. We'll be right back.
Hey, US viewers, November 8th is Election Day, so this is your friendly ITK reminder to get out and vote. Head over to vote.org to check your registration status, explore early voting, and vote by mail options, and find your local polling location. Make sure your voice is heard. Get out and vote on November 8th.
It's time for Toss Up. 2 men enter, 2 men leave. Both have healthy choice meals for lunch. What's up first?
What's the biggest problem with frontline technology? Is it a lack of tools or a lack of training?
With this one, I went to lack of tools, but not the lack of tools overall, the lack of tools specifically designed, again, for the experience we're talking about today around frontline work. And I think there's a great example in the report, if you dive in, where it says 60% of frontline workers don't believe technology can solve the burnout problem, which I fundamentally don't disagree with, but follow me. So 60% of frontline workers don't think tech can solve the problem. 29% of corporate workers agree. So again, corporate workers think technology can have a bigger impact. And my question is, are people making the judgment around the capability of technology based on the technology they've been provided or that's available to them in the workplace? Because when you break down the concept of burnout, what causes burnout in the workplace, because it's a workplace problem, not a personal problem, it includes things like managing capacity, recognizing people for their effort, effectively delegating work, making sure people are up to date with information, all of which are things that technology can influence. So I think it comes down to the fact that it's not the right technology on the front line, even if there is technology available. So that's why I went with lack of tools.
So JD, I know you're the host. I'm simply the co-host today. So I'm hopeful it's going to be okay with you if I just say, I think it's both. Is technology for efficiency or is it for enablement? I believe that there's a true difference in both of those. So there's such a strong disconnect about what specific challenges that technology can truly solve. When we're speaking to corporate leaders, they have one feeling, but then as soon as we go into the store, we go into the restaurant, the frontline manager and the employee completely disagree. One of the stats that I remember, from this fantastic report, 73% of corporate leaders feel their orgs invest in new tech for the front line, whereas only 39% of frontline workers agree. It's like crickets, right? They truly think that they're doing the right thing, and they might be doing the right thing, but the frontline worker, they just don't agree with what's taking place. So I went with both.
And that's where I think it kind of, there's a common red thread through the report around how well do you understand the experience of employees, and then are you designing a work experience that matches day-to-day reality versus saying, well, this works in a corporate setting, this works in a remote setting. It obviously must work on the front line, which I think we're clearly showing that over and over again, it does not. What's up with our next toss-up?
What's a better indicator of a happy frontline team? Efficient execution or improved profitability?
Josh,
Yeah.
what's your thought here?
So I'm going to dive right in. To me, it's operational execution. So just really looking at that efficiency that's taking place. I think it's so important in what we do, how it needs to take place. I think it helps drive an employee experience that's a better experience for them. But in the end, we just need to smash it all together and say it's frontline enablement. It truly is. With the right technology, think about task management, right? How many tasks do you come in as a frontline worker? I know, JD, back in the day when you were at the movie theater, right? Walking in and there was task after task after task that needed to be completed. But there's also that other challenge before you ever get there, and it's, what's my schedule? Oh, how do I pick up a shift? I need some more money. How do I get rid of a shift? So to me, if we have great operational execution, I think it drives a much better employee experience.
And I think when you look at kind of trying to judge if your workforce has the experience they need to be successful, and you judge, execution versus profitability, there's so many things that factor into profitability that might actually block your ability to understand. John Cena, you can't see me. Block the understanding of how the employee experience does or does not relate to actual execution, because profitability could be driven by the wrong behaviors in the front line. You could see the bottom line number you want, but in reality, people are actually struggling to execute in the way that they're being set up. So I think there's a lot of places where we can measure effectiveness of execution and connect those dots back to the experience people are having. And when people feel like they're part of the organization, when they feel like they're able to contribute, provide feedback, when they're having, dare I say, fun at work, there's clear-cut kind of connection in the report between that and the ability to do the job better, which is why I think execution's a better indicator of if people have the right experience. And I think it also leads to the ability for us to get better results even further when we know we've got the experience in place that can help us ultimately get to that level of profitability we're searching for. All right. What is our last one under toss-up?
What's a more timely reason for investing in frontline upskilling? Building bench strength or reducing turnover?
For this one, I almost went your direction, Josh, in terms of the both situation, but I'm going right now with reducing turnover. I think that's the short-term value proposition for investing in continuous skill development, where bench strength has a bit more long-term to it, but I think that's also important right now as well. So there's a stat in the report that says 43% of managers say a lack of employee training is impacting the day-to-day. So that makes this idea of continuing development of skill important for executing the role right now, and making sure people have the skills they need to limit frustrations for both themselves, for customers, and also providing that immediate opportunity for people who are great workers, who are doing a great job, to find that next opportunity, that increased earning potential quickly, and not have to sit and wait for the next program to be scheduled, the next opportunity to maybe get supervisor manager training. So you can see that path forward right away. That's why I think it's critical to invest in upskilling right now based on what we found in the report.
So interesting. So I'm going to go with bench strength. So I'm going to say building that bench is very important right now on the front line. And when I think about building the bench, let's just take a QSR, for example, right? A quick serve restaurant, and thinking about front of house and back of house. If we can build our bench strength by upskilling a front of house individual, and when the fry cook doesn't come in, that we can shift that person because we've upskilled, we've really built our bench there. I think that's powerful for the restaurant, right? It's building the camaraderie. We can continue to operate the way we need to operate. So I'm going with bench strength on this one. I think it's our first disagreement or a little void in our discussion. But yeah, bench strength seems certainly important for me.
We're agreeing to agree, because I think the idea of kind of, there's different words that are thrown around under this kind of same umbrella of continuing to develop skill in the frontline workplace. But I think that we're connecting it to the nature of cross-skilling or cross-training, right? Which I think is a heavily underutilized operational tactic, because frankly, it just comes down to the fact that the more tasks people can take on, the more positions people can work, not only does it allow for a greater level of flexibility for you as an operation, for you as a manager, but as you mentioned, it increases earning potential, right? I may be able to pick up additional shifts I couldn't pick up before. I may be able to take on positions that have a higher pay rate for that period of time. So I think the idea of making sure people have a continuous opportunity to learn, to both develop themselves right now and then set themselves up for the future is a critical part of our story. All right, let's take our final break before we sum things up and take a look at the future outlook for the frontline workforce. Stay with us.
Tune in for the next ITK as we explore what it means to belong at work. David Bader, director of the Achievers Workforce Institute, will join JD to discuss the importance of community in today's workplace. David will share his 5 pillars of belonging and show you how you can make sure your employees feel welcomed, supported, and connected from day one. That's on the next ITK, Wednesday, November 9th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time on LinkedIn Live.
Let's go to the big finish. 74% of corporate leaders are optimistic about the future of their industry, but only 54% of frontline workers agree. Cause for concern?
I'm not concerned right now. I really am not concerned. That 20% difference, I think we're in a good place to really continue moving forward. I want the stat from 3 years ago, right? Can we go back and our statisticians pull that information for us? But knowing that information, I'm looking on the bright side right now, JD. And it's really, I think the future is bright in regards to what's taking place right now. So I'm going to keep these on right now and, get your thoughts.
Let's say 46% of organizations surveyed have increased their investment in communication and training for deskless workers. Do you think we should be encouraged?
I'm encouraged, right? And I'm going to keep that view out there right now. The future is bright in regards to what we're doing. I really believe that we're hitting our stride right now and what we need to accomplish. And this report is really going to help guide us down the path of what needs to get accomplished. What about you? Are you encouraged?
I am encouraged. I think it's unfortunate we had to go through the last couple of years and an ongoing labor shortage to realize some of these insights and to really dedicate investment in improving the frontline experience, but it's great to see. Lastly, many frontline employers may be holding out hope that things are going to go back to the way they were. There's going to be this never-ending supply of workers waiting to fill open spots. Josh, you think we're ever going back?
I don't think we're ever going back to that's never-ending. I think we're going to go back to a place that people are dedicated to the job that they're signing up to do. I just believe, I go to a certain QSR restaurant that we're all familiar with, on a daily basis. Those workers have a passion for being there. I think that's what we're going back to, is a passion for the job that they have. I don't think we have the supply that we used to have.
Awesome final comment. Passion over supply. It's a great place to wrap up. Looks like we're out of time. So thanks to Josh Felix for joining me today, and big kudos to the Axonify and Nudge team for putting together this year's Deskless Report. Remember to download your copy at axonify.com/deskless. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to give us a like and a follow on LinkedIn. You can also check out the entire ITK collection on the Axonify YouTube channel. And if audio is more your thing, listen to the podcast version of In the Know with Axonify on your favorite podcast app. I'll see you in 2 weeks when I'm joined by David Bader from Achievers for a conversation about what it really means to belong in today's workplace. Until then, I've been JD. Now you're in the know. And always remember to ask yourself the important questions. Like, if people are saying that they're overwhelmed or underwhelmed, why isn't anyone ever just whelmed? I'll see you next time.